much. Let's just get right into it. The case for score systems in single-player strategy games. I'm going to turn the music down a little bit because it's distracting. You know what? I'm going to turn the music off for now because it's just hard to focus. I've argued for a long time that score systems are superior to win-loss systems. So this is, boom, I disagree. As endgame feedback mechanisms in single-player strategy games. I believe that there are significant advantages to score systems and no significant disadvantages. So all single-player strategy games going forward should adopt score systems. No. There are three main advantages that score systems have over win-loss systems. One, they eliminate foregone conclusions, which already should not exist to begin with, right? I mean, and also, is that even true? I mean, maybe they'll get into it more, but yeah, I'm not even positive that's true, but I guess that's what this article is for. Number two, provide better feedback on player performance. I also disagree with that. They provide more like resolution, but it's not better. It's different. We can just say it's different. I don't think it's better. Three, eliminate the need for multiple levels of difficulty. This one is the one I'm like most skeptical of because it's so like one size fits all. Like, I think that actually setting things up in a way that games support multiple levels of difficulty is, you shouldn't just be able to like slap something on and just have that work. I think that the game should actually require single player games are going to need some things to actually change and actually some thought go into the design about how how the difficulty escalates. You can't just like have there be some score that gets higher and higher. And we'll talk about that a bit as we go in further. Before going into detail but anyway, I disagree with like all of this basically. And we'll talk more about that as we get into the details. Before going into detail about the advantages that score systems have over win-loss systems, I want to make it clear exactly what I have in mind when I have that distinction. A win-loss system or binary system is we know what this is. Where there are exactly two possible outcomes to a given match, win and loss. A win is designated as a better outcome than a loss. I don't like that phrasing, actually. It's not about it being better. It's the win is the goal. You're trying to win. So if you win, you succeed. And if you lose, it's not like, oh, well, I lost. That's a little bit worse than winning. No, it's like you failed. It's a binary outcome. So I just think this better word is like already sort of hinting at that there's a thinking about outcomes in a non-binary way to begin with. In a win-loss system, the player's goal is to end the game with a win. Yes, that's a better way of wording it. A score system is any system in which there are more than two possible outcomes, and each outcome is assigned a real number. This number is called the score. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see this text a bit better. And one score is better than another score if and only if it is greater. In a score system, the player's goal is to maximize their average or expected score. Okay. And I have problems with the idea of maximize because like when did you not maximize? You know, like if you played the game, it's very hard to explain how I didn't maximize that time. Like but that's the thing is like I'm baking in the binary there because I'm trying to ask, you know, did you maximize? Whereas Hop is just concerned with like that the overall process is the process of maximization. So my question is sort of unfair in the same way where I'm asking a binary question of this thing which is not binary. But then to me it's like I don't understand how a goal, like to me the idea of achieving a goal or not is binary, like on some level, like you know, just when you have a task, you have to be able to know whether you achieve the task or not afterwards. Like I think that's very important. And you know, whatever the thing is, like, did you take out the garbage? Like you have to be able to know, like, did you do the task or not? Um, it seems like Hop is narrowing to a specific kind of score system here, with an average to start with. Now I want a game with half ordered score. Like we stop at a strict ordering the score. I don't understand that. We do all scores have to be comparable? I don't understand what you're saying, Dark. Maximize average score versus get high score are different though. But in either case, you're trying to maximize this number, whether it's the average score or the individual high score. Um, they are both different, but in both cases, you are trying to maximize. And my question is, when have you maximized or when have you not maximized? And it's impossible to know that, and that's my problem with that. Like, there's no well, and again, I'm baking in the binary sort of thing of like, because I'm still looking for like, well, how do I know that I achieved what I set out to achieve or not? Did you achieve this task or not is not the only way to think about goals. You can think of how well did I do the task. But like, yeah, how well did I do the task? Yeah, but however well I did it, oh, that's how well I did it. It's like it doesn't have what are you and especially in strategy games. Like this is the crucial thing that I'm really harping on is like with strategy games you're setting out to do a specific thing. Um do well is more of like a contest value where you're just like trying to put in as many as many of the thing as you can. That's not what strategy is. Strategy is not just do well, and I think that we have this problem because we have this disagreement because our games are mostly high score games and they're mostly very tactical games, and so we can't even. It's hard for us to conceive of a system where you would actually have to use strategy in a non-tactical loopy kind of way. In other words, it's hard for us to conceive of games where really the final outcome is the only thing that can tell you how well you did or not. Anyways, a little bit on a sidetrack there. Okay. What else? Some games that look like they may use a score system don't actually meet the criterion I've described. In particular, many games that involve scores expect and encourage the player to try to beat their highest score they previously achieved. That's the traditional model, which Hop and I both agree is bad. That goal is different from trying to maximize the average score, so I do not count these as score systems. Like that's a little weird. I think Hop, you should probably you're being very prescriptive here about score systems. Like I think you need to name your score system because like pinball has a score system. You know what I mean? Like you're being prescriptive and you should probably just give it its own term, in my opinion. Kind of a side note. In fact, they are a type of win-loss system because the outcome of the match is binary. Yes, that's true. You either beat your previous score, a win, or you don't, a loss. Sort of, although the way people play them is more like what you're saying. They typically are looking at like, well, how well did I do? How much points did I get? I don't think this type of system is good. We agree on that. So when I refer to score system in the rest of this post, I'm referring to only to systems in which the goal is to maximize average score, not to pass the binary threshold. Yeah, so I really recommend naming this idea of yours because I do think even though I disagree with it very much, like I think it's a good tool to have, and I do think there are some kinds of games that should use this. I think like more toy-like things should use this system. And yeah, in many cases, the only thing incentivizes a player to aim for beating their previous highest score instead of maximizing their average score is the fact that the game software tracks their highest score but not their average score. It's nice to have a single number as an emblem of the player's current skill level, both that they can see their progress over time and they can be ranked on leaderboards. The highest score a player has ever achieved is a decent choice for such a number, but I don't even think that's a decent choice. I think it's terrible because like it's going to just be some outlier thing. Like there's going to be some game where things just kind of lined up for a while, especially right towards the end. And you just got this. And that's the other problem with score. I mean, my deeper problem here is and I haven't worded it well, but I am fundamentally skeptical of score, let alone whatever kind of system it is. It's just the whole idea of a score that can like kind of be going up and up and up in such a way that you could have an average is I'm increasingly skeptical of that. I think that's the fundamental problem that I have with this at the end of the day. The highest score a player has ever achieved is a decent choice for such a number, but it isn't the only number you could use. Instead, you could calculate after each match the average score of the last few matches a player has played. That player will rise as the player improves their skills, so it can be used to show a player their progress over time, and it can also be used to rank players on a leaderboard. The difference is that this way of measuring skill encourages the player to maximize their average score on each match rather than trying to beat a binary threshold. Michael Bros' game P1 Select uses a system like this, as is my own game Brazenberry Bonanza. By the way, isn't that game is the game with like the really cool music? I think I remember. Yeah, really awesome music in that one. Yeah, it's really good. Let's check the chat. Yeah, it should be a term for this. Michael Bro uses this. Flexible score goal games. I would just call it like something like average score or like par. We've talked about par before. I like those terms. In most existing games with score system, the score is a quantity that starts out at 0 at the beginning of the match and then increases by some amount each time some kind of event occurs in the match. Often there are many different types of events that can increase the score by different amounts, but there is no reason that all score systems must be like that, and I think that those types of designs should generally be avoided. In Brazenberry Bonanza, there is only one action that increases score, and it always increases score by exactly 1 point, picking a ripe berry. And so, like, not that, you know, Brazenberry Bonanza is like the be-all, end-all or anything, but, like, this hints at my problem with score. Is that, like, every time you do blankety blank, you get this point that just gets put into a bucket and, like, taken out of the game, basically. You know, like, a visualization of my problem is, like, victory points in almost every board game, where, like, we have this thing going on, but then there's just, like, I'm tallying victory points over by me, and they're not feeding back into the game. They're, like, removed from the game completely. That's what points are. That's, like, what score is. And then by the end, it's like, well, who tallied the most of the victory points? And there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with points in this way. I sometimes use high score system this is something from the chat from Hop. I sometimes use high score system to refer to the classical beat your old best. I see. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. But I do think if someone outside our community reads this and just sees score system, they're going to not know what you're talking about probably. Okay. So anyway, that was my rant about score systems, that points are being removed from the system and then at the end just tallied up. And I just think that there's something wrong with that. Additionally, in most games with score systems, the score has no effect on the rest of the game state. That's true. This is kind of what I was just talking about. And it never decreases. Again, there's no reason that all score systems must be like that. And I also think maybe that those types of design should also generally be avoided. Really? So that's actually surprising to me. Because, like, I feel like if the score, quote unquote, is going back into the rest of the game state and it never decreases, like, I feel like, or rather it does decrease. Like, I feel like that's like a weird use of the word score at that point. Have I written an article against actor removal yet? I don't think I have. I had a talk prepared for that, but then I didn't end up doing it for some reason. Let me see. Actor removal. I think there was a podcast episode about it. Yeah, I don't know. Oh yeah, here's my Indiecade talk. This talks about it. I don't think I ever put this into like video form or anything, but it's a thing. Yeah, I should write an article about that at some point. Again, there is no reason all score systems must be like that, blah, blah, blah. We already talked about that. A score could be treated like a resource, which can be both gathered and consumed or exchanged for other resources. Could even be a quantity that doesn't exist until the very end of the match, rather than being something that accumulates over time. So, like, all of this stuff about the way that score is being talked about here is like, Um, I feel like depending on the implementation, maybe we need some examples, but like, I feel like a lot of times this wouldn't even read as score. All that a score system is fundamentally is one way of assigning a numerical value to the game state at the end of the match. Existing score systems and the design patterns common to them represent only a small corner of the space of all possible score systems, and more effort should go to exploring different types of score systems. I agree with all that, except I don't think not in strategy games. It is important to understand that when I say that players should maximize their score, I'm referring only to the value of the score at the end of the match. A player should not care about their score before the end of the match, except for the extent that doing so helps them maximize their score at the end of the match. If a player is choosing between two plans, A and B, they expect plan A will give them 5 points, but will result in an average score of only 20 at the end of the match, while plan B will give no points immediately, but will eventually an average score of 30 at the end of the match. They can choose plan B. And I think this is something that, by the way, at the end of the match, I think Hop and I both agree that that there should be like a finite, like players should have a good set idea of when the end of the match is coming. So that's something that we do agree on. So that this kind of a calculation could be made, because score, anything with score, if there's no finite end, you get that weird problem where you just start doing like Hail Marys to get the highest possible thing, or the most conservative. I think actually, yeah, with that one it's the most conservative, and then it's like with high score you do the Hail Mary strategy. Yeah, if you want the highest average, you do the most conservative. Decisions like these, in which the immediate score payoff of a decision can differ significantly from the long-term payoff, will occur regularly in any interesting strategy game with a score system. There are some games that use score systems where a lower score is better rather than a higher score. Does that matter? Examples include golf and speed running. This is different. Yeah, superficial. Yep. Okay. This post focuses entirely on single player games rather than multiplayer games. We can just skip that paragraph just because it's a long thing. We're all on the page of single player strategy games. There are many strategy games that don't fall nicely into these other two categories. Some games normally end in win or loss, but occasionally end in a draw or tie. Such a system, it isn't clear exactly what a player's goal is. Presumably, a draw is somewhat worse than a win. It's somewhat better than a loss, but how much worse or better is it? No, I mean, no. See, this whole better worse thing. Like, a draw is the game didn't work. A draw is the game broke down. That's what a draw is. A draw is not a normal state. It should never happen. The only reason we accept draws is we're still playing these like 500-year-old games that were way before the game design era, and of course they have draws because we're like, basically it's like, I don't know, think about like what were houses like 500 years ago. How would it be? Well, you'd have to do some weird shit, like you'd have to like have a outhouse or something, or whatever. Draws is a total failure of game design. It's not like a medium state between winning and losing. So that I disagree with a lot. Games don't provide a concrete answer to this question, so the goal of the game is ill-defined. No, that's not true. This is all wrong. That's all wrong right there. Let's see what the chat is saying while I drink this soda. I think you want to be maximally conservative thing is a misunderstanding of what it means to maximize average score. In the part you're reading, I'm agreeing with you. Draws are bad design. Okay, good. But the thing is, like, there's sort of a critique here about win-loss games. I mean, I guess most people, like, most games don't even have ties. But it sort of feels like there's like games don't provide a concrete answer to this question because ties are there. So it just feels a little bit like there's more of a statement being made here about generally games, even though most games don't have ties. But yes, I agree. Ties are garbage. Similarly, some games give the player both a score and a win or loss at the end of the match. That's bizarre when that happens. Yeah, the goal is definitely ill-defined there. We agree on that. Should the player try to get a win or get a high score? Exactly. Presumably, they should do both. Although I will say in strategy games, I don't think I've ever seen this. Like this is something I see in like single player, like Mario. You know, Mario has like a win and roguelikes and things like that. Which I guess arguably roguelikes are kind of strategy ish, but that's what I mean. Like we don't have, uh, we have all this like weird edge casey kind of things. Yeah, and like roguelikes, I don't know if roguelikes should be considered really strategy games. That's what I mean. Like they're really just like a looping tactics thing where you just like do this tactics thing over and over and over again. You don't have a strategy in roguelikes really. Or I mean you may have like a loose general thing, but it's more the strategy in roguelikes is more like, oh, never drink a potion until you have like X number of potions or whatever. They're more like just general, like honestly, rules knowledge, really. Yeah, it is worth mentioning. Presumably, they should do both when possible, but in cases where the player has to choose between winning and getting a higher score, which of the, oh yeah, we totally agree about all this. Scores ill-defined. Yep. Totally. That's totally. And roguelikes also. Rogue came out in 1980, so we should not be still doing the same thing. It's like a very pinball kind of concept. Eliminating foregone conclusions. A foregone conclusion in a strategy game is a situation. All right, this part should be interesting. I'm excited for this part. A situation in which the player knows whether they will win or lose before the match actually ends. For example, you play very well or get lucky in the first half of a match and you reach a point where you know that you're going to win, but you still need to continue playing the game for several minutes before you actually get to the end. The conclusion is foregone in those last several minutes. Okay, now before we go any further, I think that the reason that this is a real problem is because our games are not very complex and they're not very deep and they're not very like surprising yet inevitable style surprising where like you can imagine games that are like the games we have that are win-loss but that are sufficiently like deep and complex and like have all this emergent interesting stuff and room for creative play where like I don't think we'll ever get rid of this completely, the foregone conclusion thing, but like that could be massively mitigated. So I just want to like say that as a side note before we go further. It's also possible to have a foregone conclusion where you know you're going to lose before the match ends. Yeah. League of Legends grades. They're bad. I mean, probably shouldn't have that. But I mean, the problem is League has so many problems already, that, in terms of like, there's all these other metrics, like, League, we talked, I think recently about how in a game like League, you have so many of these like other fake goals that players are going for, like how good are you farming? How many kills do you have? Things like that. And so there's already all these metrics. And so, if I was being the straight answer is grades are bad. But the thing is like they're in this context of a situation where there's just so many bad things and so many like of those kinds of bad things that it's like they're fine, whatever. It doesn't matter. They're not a big deal. I think foregone conclusions are bad because of the time. But if you were to throw grades into a good game, or like imagine if there's like some, I don't know, like even like I'm trying to think of a good example. Like some Euro game or something. I don't know. I guess that's not really possible to do it. Yeah, like some tabletop Euro game, and then like you win, but then you get like a D grade. Like I feel like that's really bad. And also grades, yeah, that's the other thing is that grades make a little bit more sense in team games, I guess, than they do in a one-on-one game or a one-player game. Because like in one player, like what does it mean if I get an F and I win? It's bizarre. So yeah, there shouldn't be grades, or there should only be grades, and it's pass or fail. How about that? Foregone conclusions are bad because I mean we agree that foregone conclusions are bad. My thing about this like foregone conclusions and also like the other end. So these would be like chess closing moves and also opening moves. Some of this kind of stuff is just always going to be a part, I think, of strategy games. And I'm not actually even sure that the, so actually this, what Hop is suggesting doesn't actually change this. It doesn't get rid of foregone conclusions. It just makes it that the conclusion like doesn't matter because it's just going to be what it's going to be what it's going to be. It's going to be like, oh, maybe it'll be 67 or maybe it'll be 84, but like whatever it is, it's going to be what it's going to be. So like the idea of a foregone conclusion just doesn't even make sense in that context. But I mean, well, to the extent that the game is like solved and you're just going to keep doing what you're doing towards the end of the game, it's still true in a score game. Like if, let's say it's like 5 turns or 10 turns from the end of the game, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get like 80 points this game. Like you can kind of just like see that it's going to happen. And so that's the foregone conclusion. Do you see what I'm saying? And like maybe there's a little more wiggle room, I guess, but like, does it really matter? I don't know. I think it's more just that we're eliminating conclusions. It's then foregone conclusions. I don't know. I'm not wording that probably right, but it's going to be and I agree. It is going to be what it's going to be is true of win-loss too. But I'm saying this doesn't eliminate that really. It just makes it that, I mean, the thing in conclusions and foregone conclusions, there's an inherent binariness in that. So it's like, yeah, you're getting rid of the foregone conclusion, the binary foregone conclusion. But there's still, to the extent that there can be any conclusion in that sense in a score-based game, it's still there as much in a score-based game as it would be in a binary game. Situations in which a player is not certain what the outcome will be, or thinks what one outcome is very likely to occur, are not quite foregone conclusions, but still represent a list or version of the same problem. And I do think that that's a problem, but I also think that it's like, you're not going to be able to see, I'm going to get exactly 80 points at the end of the match far from the end in most score games. Yeah, but like maybe kind of close to the end, or you are going to be able to get there. Like, yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's possible. Let's just keep going forward. Games with score systems don't have this problem. If you play well or get lucky in the early portion of a match, that just means that your score at the end of the match will be higher than it otherwise would. And if you play poorly or get unlucky, your score will be lower than it otherwise would. The conclusion isn't foregone because there's still a wide range of possible scores that you could get. Yeah, but like if the game is good in either situation, like think of it this way. Think of it as like, okay, we have strategy. Let's talk about like a binary strategy game that has long arcs, right? At some point, those arcs are kind of like the amount of game left is sufficiently low that the arcs, you're not going to be able to like really turn the arcs around at this point too much. Like you have just a very small amount of time left to change the trajectory of this game, right? And so it like sort of becomes like foregone conclusion-y. Now, if we change the kind of goal that there is, all that arc stuff, assuming there are arcs in this, which that's another topic, but like assuming there are large arcs, that same dynamic is going to be there. If the match end is coming soon, the arcs are what they are, and I have X number of inputs left to make where I can actually influence that at all. So yes, you can like wiggle it maybe a little bit, but it's like, and the thing is like the amount that you can wiggle it, assuming this game is designed well, shouldn't be very significant, right? Because then you're like overriding all these long arcs. And so it's really just like, yeah, you can wiggle it a little bit based on tactics stuff, but like what, I guess, that's how I feel. I don't know if that's clear. Your actions in the remaining portion of the game can still affect the outcome significantly, so you need to come up with good plans rather than just going through the motions to get a predetermined outcome. I mean, the outcome is a little bit predetermined in any situation, assuming we have long arcs. That's kind of what I was trying to get at there. So now you're working your wiggle skill into the metrics of your performance. It's measuring more. Yeah, but like, should it? Is that good? Is it good if like I just did some good tactical stuff at the end and now I have like 3 more points? Or like maybe that's fine, but like who cares about the 3 more points? Like I don't know. It just seems weird. And I still think my fundamental thing is like I think that games built designed in this way are going to be very tactical, and they're going to be very much about just like consistently doing good tactics. That's my prediction about this kind of games built with this kind of way of thinking. Um, as you approach the end of the game, the range of possible scores presumably shrinks. The conclusion gets closer to foregone, perhaps, but when there are only 2 outcomes, it becomes foregone much quicker. Yeah, I guess I can grant that. I just think that there's a lot that you get in exchange for that. But yes, I think that's a binary conclusion is just like more of a conclusion in a sense, in the way that when we were talking about foregone conclusions, we're talking about meaning. And, 2 points out of an 85-point score is not much meaning, whereas win loss is like massive meaning. So, like, you can really, when there is a win coming, that's like a huge foregone conclusion in the sense of the word foregone conclusion, phrase foregone conclusion. Whereas when there's like, oh, there's like 2 more points coming, um, you know, it's just, it doesn't mean as much. I'm saying like getting 1 or 2 more points doesn't mean as much as the difference between winning and losing. Um, I feel like that's like obviously true. Is there a way around foregone conclusions in a long arc game? No. You will always have some amount of foregone conclusions, assuming your long arcs have meaning, right? Because like your long arcs are doing what they're doing. They're on these paths. And so, I think you're going to have some degree of foregone conclusions, and that's true in a score-based game too. You can just wiggle with tactics the tail end of these long arcs a little bit more, but like that's not who cares, you know? Why is binary more of a conclusion? I'm talking about in the sense of the phrase foregone conclusions. Like when we say the phrase foregone conclusions, we're talking about um, uh, like our position in this match and what's going to happen, and whether or not or like how the game is going to conclude. Like it's foregone. We already know sort of how this game is going to conclude. And I think that with long arcs, you're always going to have some amount of that, because that's what long arcs are. And you've been building them up and like setting them on these trajectories throughout the match. So at a certain point, it is going to be foregone. And that's true in a score-based game too. It's just that, it's not like exactly the number, but it's not about exactly the number anyway, right? Like that's the whole point of this thing, is it's about like the average general thing, like a few points here and there. Like I thought that was the point of the whole par thing, is that it's not about getting 2 or 3 points here or there. It's about your consistent performance in a certain at a certain capacity, a rough capacity, not 1 point. Like in fact, and that's the thing too about, that's another problem I have with score systems, is that 1 point shouldn't matter, because like 1 point is like or like not shouldn't matter, but like it kind of shouldn't matter in the final feedback. That's another way of phrasing my problem is you have this final feedback, and there shouldn't be a connection between some tactical thing I did like 30, 40 turns ago. That shouldn't be reflected so directly in the final outcome. And that's where I feel like these kinds of games are going to be more tactical, because you're just taking these things out and putting them into a bucket. I know that Hop said the thing about like, oh well, it doesn't have to be like a point bucket. It could be something else. But like, I guess I'd like to see some examples of that, or some illustrations of how that, maybe that's will be in this article. Let's keep moving forward. What does Brick Road agree with? It's about your consistent 2-3 points are here or there, and your ability to do the longer arc things. Yeah, but the 2-3 points here or there, they should. I guess here's a way to put it, just to talk even more. it's like, here's how it should work. You have the tactical layer, and then the strategy layer, and then like, your final feedback, right? And the tactical layer feeds into the strategy layer, and the strategy layer ultimately is really what determines the final feedback. That's the thing that's like really determinative of that. But in a score game, you actually have the tactical layer skipping that and going directly into the final feedback by just like putting a point in a bucket. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah. All right, so let me drink some water, and then I'm gonna continue. Ugh, this water is gross. Okay. For any particular win-loss strategy game, there might be changes the designer could make that would make foregone conclusions rarer or shorter. Exactly, and that's what I recommend. Such changes, however, will only be applicable to the particular game they were designed for. Well, that's true of any. That's true of. I mean, that's yeah. You just sorry, you gotta do the game design. You just gotta do it, and perhaps similar to similar games, but not to most other win-loss games. That's true. So solving this problem for a given game could require significant design effort. That's true. Further, I doubt that it is even possible in general to entirely remove foregone conclusions from a complex single-player strategy win-loss strategy game. Uh, yeah. So the thing is with this, and like this is sort of like what Hop was just saying in the chat. Like I don't know of any decent win-loss single-player strategy games that entirely solves the problem of foregone conclusions. Yeah, but like 9 games of this type, and they're by like 3 different game designers. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of a new thing. Like it's kind of I don't know how much weight this should have, I guess. But in any case, I am currently designing a game that will remove foregone conclusions from a complex single player win loss strategy game. Well, not entirely, but will massively mitigate them. I don't think you can entirely remove them, and I don't think that these entirely eliminate them either. Conversely, it's possible to conceive of a game with a score system that has foregone conclusions. For example, this is kind of interesting. If a game has an upper cap on possible scores, well, yeah, that's true. That it can be achieved regularly by a good player, then such a player might reach a point in the match where they know they're going to hit the maximum. Yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure. However, this kind of foregone conclusion is very easy to avoid. Yeah, just don't have an upper cap. While it's technically possible to have foregone conclusions, regardless of whether. I was hoping that would be more like what I was trying to say. But yes, you could. Yeah, you could slap a max score on, which would be really silly. Better end game feedback. This is another thing I think we disagree about, and I think that what this really means is, on top of the general, outcome, how many times did you like smack the point bar? How many times did you hit the get a point button? I don't believe non-accumulation-y score systems can exist. Yeah, the crouch mode, bringing it. The accumulation can be non-obvious and obfuscated. That's true. Okay. By definition, games with win-loss systems provide a single bit, the information theoretic sense, of an endgame feedback, while games with score systems provide more than one bit. Some games may provide extra feedback in addition to the win-loss score, such as the number of enemies killed, blah, blah, blah. Those aren't indicative of a player's performance. They aren't considered here. So score systems give the player more feedback than win-loss systems do. This difference is important because the point of strategy games is for the player to learn how to play the game well, which means, I don't know if that's true. It's not about learning how to play the game well. I mean, I guess indirectly it is, but it's really about learning how to win, right? Like that's the point, is to try to but well, I mean, I'm baking in the thing, but like looking at a typical strategy game, historically speaking, that would be it is more about winning than playing well, but I guess that's maybe there's might not be a distinction there that I can clarify. Which means learning what kinds of strategies are more effective than others and why. Yes, that's true. I mean, I would say another way to put this is building a model of the system, like an internal model that's accurate model, whatever. Hop has some responses. Crouch mode. By accumulation score systems, I mean ones where score just increases and never decreases and doesn't interact with the rest of the game state. But I mean, even if it does interact with the rest of the game state, it's still accumulation-y. It's still like this resource that's getting. I don't know. I guess I'd have to see. I guess I'm curious to see. That I'm less sure about. In order to agree with your conclusion, strategy games shouldn't care about 2 or 3 points at the end of the match. I have to agree with your premise that games should not reward tactics directly. Yes, I agree. Games should not reward tactics directly. Tactics should be something that's like a part of strategy. It's like they're like the building blocks of strategy, kind of. That's actually maybe the clearest way I can put my objection to this theory, is that it's going to reward tactics directly, and I don't think strategy games should reward tactics directly. I think that's the most concise response I can probably come up with. The purpose of the feedback provided at the end of the match, which either takes the form of a single bit. Oh, I think I already read that. In a win-loss system, you know that strategy A is better than strategy B if A leads to victory and B doesn't. If both A and B lead to victory or loss, then you don't have a way to tell which is better than the other. Wait, what? Well, yeah, unless you do this thing that everyone always does. Yeah, you did this. What do you mean unless? Who plays a strategy game just one time or 2 times? A strategy game is the process of playing a large number of matches. That's what a strategy game is. That's how it exists. If you just play a strategy game one time, like honestly, it's similar to playing it 0 times, because you're not really playing it. You don't have that iterative process of playing, testing, iterating, changing your model, trying something out, experimenting. That's what a strategy game is. So this unless thing is like very kind of like that's just a misunderstanding, I think, of like how strategy games exist in the world, how people play them. They don't just play them 1 or 2 times and compare like, well, that time I went for the X strategy, and it won, so I guess it's better. Oh, but the second game, the Y strategy also won. I guess they're equally valid. Anyway, moving on with life. Like that's just not a real thing. In a score system, on the other hand, you know that strategy A is better than strategy B if A leads to a higher score than B. Do you? In 2 matches, really? See, this is okay. This isn't just straight up like wrong territory, because, I mean, yeah, I assuming it's a complex game, assuming it has like things like input randomness. I don't think that you do know this from playing 2 matches, right? I think that you need to play this. I think it's still the same. You need to play many, many matches, in order to know whether the A is better than B. And Brickrow, do you want me to do this with your article, tomorrow? Because I know you wrote a new article, and I'd love to. We could get into that. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. I don't know if we've already talked about it or whatever, but I would love to go into that if you want me to. Cool. So anyway, this is my highlighted with this is the thing I disagree with most strongly. It will be rare that any 2 strategies lead to exactly the same score. So a score system almost always lets you discriminate between 2 strategies. But dude, they're not. You can't trust that in 2 matches. Do you agree with me, Hop? That you can't just go off of 2. Yeah. You need fewer in score systems? Maybe. I guess I could grant maybe fewer. I mean, why do you need fewer? I don't know why you need that. Because, like, for example, like, actually the numbers and the fact that it's not a binary thing could actually make it more complicated. Like, you have to do some weird math. Like, okay, I got, like, 60, like, let me open up a text file here or something. Like I got, strategy A got, let me make this text bigger for you guys. Got, 60, 70, 90, 120, and like, or something like that. And then strategy B got like, 50, Yeah, we could have like all kinds of weird arrangements, like 100, 150 or something. It's like now I have to do some weird calculus equation to like figure out like how the hell one of these is better than the other. And this is what it's going to look like. You know, it's not going to be like, oh, strategy A was all up and strategy B was all down. It's going to be some weird mix. And like you have to do these weird like calculations in order to know. Whereas in a win-loss game, you can just know strategy A, win, like win, 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 or loss, loss, win, whatever. I don't know how you spell words, but you know what I'm saying? Like, and then strategy B can be like, oh, there was one less loss. Boom. Slammo. You know what I mean? But averaging, okay. The other problem with this is, do you really average? Like, first of all, this is so theoretical because like strategy A is not, you're not actually doing one strategy when you play a game, right? Like, the idea that in a complex game you actually did like a bunch of things, and maybe like there was one thing you did, but it's not like that was the only factor. There's all kinds of other factors there, right? And so now you're saying, okay, but every time you did this one strategy as part of your strategy, you know, part of one of the factors, write that down and just make an average of all those times that you just did the one thing that's like part of your strategy. Write those all down and average them out. Like no one's doing that, you know? So anyways, a bit of a side thing. Very dehydrated. You want to know why? It's because I ate McDonald's. Never eat McDonald's. Actually, addendum. McDonald's is delicious, so you can eat it sometimes, but just make sure you drink a lot of water afterwards because it's like really, really salty. Okay. Let's see what's going on in the chat here. In a sense, if you're saying that all the stuff near the end of a match is tactical, I see. You guys are talking about the tactics, points stuff. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna keep going because we still got a bunch of article to go, and I want to get back to the potatoes after this if I have time. Let's see. Some people. I know. I wonder who those could be. All right. In win-loss system, you know that strategy A is. Did I read all this? Let's see. In the score system, on the other hand, you know that strategy A is right. Okay. Yes, this was the thing that I'm like, nah. It's not true. A match is a win-loss system. So in either case, you have to like, average them out. It's this weird, blurry sort of thing. That's where we just were. I don't think it is much harder. I think it's easier. But when I made this point in the past, some people have objected this difference doesn't matter because the player can tell which of two matches went better, even if they both ended with the same outcome. That wasn't me, actually. I wouldn't have said that. It's true that players can have a sense of how well a match went or is going that is independent of the in-game feedback they receive. Sort of. And developing the sense is important part of learning how to properly play the game. However, players' perception of, yes, I guess that's true. Developing this part, I would say it's not an important part. I would say it's just like it just happens. It's like a necessary byproduct of learning to play a game well. However, a player's perception of how well a match went is no substitute for the in-game feedback. That's true. That the game provides because perception is theory-laden. A player's perception of how well they did depends on their strategic understanding of the game. So if their understanding is flawed, then that perception will be flawed too. End-game feedback, on the other hand, doesn't depend on the player's understanding of the game. Yep, it's an objective reflection of how well they played, though it all can be influenced by random events. When a player's... Well, here's the thing, too. I mean, check this out. Here's another take. Another Keith Burgon official take right here. When you have random events, which you do, even if you have input randomness and not output randomness, and even if it's like what I call uniform randomness, you still are being influenced by random events. So the extra feedback or the extra bits or whatever that you're getting are like, there's a good case to be made that win and loss creates this cutoff point that really helps to deal with that random noise. Because yes, there's noise, but you really just need to get it over this threshold and to get there. Whereas when in a score game, the noise is just getting kind of actively recorded by the points, and they're just going into the points and they're just staying there. I'm just following up on the chat. Looks like the chat's got its own thing going on. Let's see. And so King of Kong means nothing, or all this, or is all this strategy based score hate? I haven't played King of Kong. Or wait, King of Kong. Oh, I know that's the documentary about the guy who plays King Kong, or the Donkey Kong. What it means something. It's a story about a man who gets really obsessed with Donkey Kong. I don't know what do you want from that? Also, that's not a strategy game. Like, that's a very far from a strategy game. Donkey Kong. Cutting down only one bit doesn't help with noise. It just gives you less info, so you know less about the noise. I think it does help with noise because there's a lot of meaning that's built up in the system, and there's some noise. And if you get it to a certain level, it's like it cuts off, that strategic power or whatever at a certain point. It's more coarse, and I think that coarseness is actually a good thing for cutting down on the randomness. In either case, you have to play many games in both situations, but I don't like the idea of basically a random event happens and it just gets recorded and it just gets added as a point plus 1 point. Like I think that's too much resolution. If you're trying to pass some cutoff, then the randomness will affect your chance to pass the cutoff just as it would affect your score. That's true. But if you're that close to a win or a loss that the randomness is deciding it, then, you should be winning and losing 50%. So like, that seems fine to me. It's the games where you rank up or whatever when you have been consistently winning. You're right, though, that even a game with input randomness and uniform randomness is almost certainly going to have less than 100% skill compensation. Yeah. When a player's strategic understanding of the game is flawed, blah, blah, blah. I think we know about this, and we agree about this. Let me just read this real quick. So the fact that players have a sense of how well a match went that is independent of the end-game feedback doesn't mean that the feedback is unimportant. Oh, okay. So this is just a general statement about end-game feedback being important. Which, by the way, like, Hop and I, most of the game design world, Hop and I would be on the same team here trying to argue even that end-game feedback is important. Because that's not even acknowledged. Like, we agree on that, and then we're talking about what kind of end game feedback and how do you best deliver that. But it's worth stepping back and just realizing, like, not everyone even agrees with us on that. Team end game feedback. If the randomness affecting win-loss by a bit doesn't matter, why does it affecting the score? No, I think it matters. I think it matters in either case. Brick Road revealed just this week that endgame feedback isn't important. Brick Road, how could you? Okay, no need for multiple levels. If you agree, as I do, with Keith Burgon's argument that the ideal win rate for win-loss strategy game is 50%, yay, team 50%. It's essential for any win-loss game to have multiple levels of difficulty for players of different skill levels. This means that a designer creating a win-loss game needs to either design many different levels of difficulty, each of which is effectively a version of the game with slightly different rules, or design a system that adjusts some parameters of the game to get a desired level of difficulty. Either way, the rules of the game will change as the player progresses to higher levels of difficulty. This means that some of a player's knowledge about how to play the game will become obsolete, not because they discovered better knowledge to replace it, because they're now playing a slightly different game and their old knowledge doesn't apply to this new game. And by the way, this is something that is in every game. Multiplayer games work this way. There are, there are character tier lists, for example, in fighting games for different levels of play. Characters who are like extremely good when you first start playing become garbage sometimes when you're later on. Um, the Illuminati, weird. What's going on in chat? This is the first score argument. This is the first score argument that makes any sense to me. In every game, score games, not score games that don't have multiple difficulty levels. Every win-loss game, maybe. I don't know what that's in reference to. I think I said something and I forgot what it was. Games with score systems don't need to maintain a 50% win rate, but because there's no such thing as winning, so they don't have this problem. Yeah, you just play, and then whatever happens. So I mean, let me just take a little side thing of like when I play a game and it doesn't have a goal, like a win-loss goal. I have a feeling that this is not theory anymore. This is just like aesthetic personal feelings, but I feel very demotivated because I feel like, well, no matter what happens, I'm going to get a number, and then it's true that like after you play more and more, you start like having your par and you start kind of like going for your par. But like if I get really close to my par, it sort of feels like, I don't know, like it sort of feels like a draw actually. Like it sort of just feels like, how like people hate draws who are not game design theory people. People just hate draws on an aesthetic level because they feel like I just think nothing happened. And if you get around your par, so just talking aesthetically now, if you are playing a par game, a lot of the times when you play, you're going to be getting roughly par, right? And that kind of sucks, like that it sort of feels draw-like to like if your par is 60 and you get like 57 or 58 or 59 or 61 even or 60, like a lot of times you're going to be getting those. And like, it just kind of sucks, And I feel very demotivated when I see that a game doesn't have that kind of like, here's what you're going for. Can you do it? Yes or no? And you can do it in all kinds of weird, crazy ways, but ultimately you know what you're going for. You're going to get a yes or no, like a success or failure out of it. It's not going to give you some like emoji, you know what I mean? And that's what I mean. Now you're getting into my feelings on win-loss, KB. I prefer win-loss because it feels better to have a system in the world that gives clear feedback about successes and failure because it's so uncommon generally. I mean, yeah, sure. That is another thing about it is that, yeah, in real life, a lot of times, like, you never really get wins and losses. Like everything is always this like shitty, like gray soup, right? In real life, everything is always like this, not really, but like, a lot of times, like you do something, you do some goal, but like you fucked something up on the way and like, oh, okay. Like, and it is kind of nice aesthetically that strategy games are like, victory. Like how many times otherwise do you actually get a banner in your face saying victory, like you succeeded? I mean that's a really aesthetically or just on a human level, that's kind of a nice thing. I think I could also make a counter argument maybe to that, which is that maybe it's unhealthy. You could argue that like the idea that we're just giving people these binary victory failure stories and training them to think in this binary kind of way, maybe that's bad for people. I could see that. But I also think like for me personally, I grew up in the world playing victory success games. Basically everybody in the whole world that did and has, and to shift away from that dramatically, like think about like sports and how important sports are to people and how like baked into society and culture sports are, and how those, I'm just saying like, if I think actually probably if I was Hop, the strongest argument Hop could make probably to me that I can think of is put aside all the theory stuff. It's just not good for people to be thinking in a binary win-loss kind of way, and to be training themselves to think that life is going to be like, oh, I won, I succeeded, yes, or I didn't. That could be a really unhealthy thing. With that said, we're still going to keep making these kinds of games. Like, we're not getting away from it. There may be a small contingent of tiny indies who make, score games in this way, like myself, level of indies. No disrespect to that at all. But generally speaking, like in the world, this is the language people speak, is that wins and losses, and so that's just another thing, I guess. But in terms of theory, now going back to theory, I think that that's my favorite aspect of this is the fact that it gets people away from binary thinking. I don't know, just a thought. Um, in a game with a score system that has one level of difficulty, there's no rules for the need for the rules to ever change. I also, by the way, this is now getting back into full theory mode. I'm skeptical of this. Um, I am skeptical that you could make a complex strategy game that just works at all levels of play, from like total noob to like super advanced, like just super high level play. Um, this is how good I am at KB stream. I'm clicking on this link. I don't know what this is. Whoa, is this like a print screen website? Because God, I want that. What am I looking at here? Oh, 5K? Is that the thing I'm looking at? That's a lot of K, if so. Nice. Oh, crouch mode coming in with the 6.8. And he spends some for cool messages. Wow. Pretty good. I think No More Birds is still beating all of you, though. Even though he's not here now. Or maybe he's here now and just not engaging with the design theory stuff. I should get that? Yeah, I think I'm gonna. It sounds awesome. Because I press print screen all the time, and then I post it into Photoshop. And I like have to wait for Photoshop to load and shit. It's like a nightmare. That's my life. So anyways, so yeah, I'm skeptical about this. I think you're gonna have to make some different rules. We'll see, I guess. But yeah. An expert player will be playing exactly the same as the beginner. It's nice in theory. I just think in practice that's not going to work. This means that once a player has learned how to play the game, they will never let learn any rules again, and they can focus on how to maximize their scores given the way the rules are. A player's old strategic knowledge may be eventually become obsolete, but only when they come up with new knowledge that usurps it. Well, yeah, I mean that's how it is in everything. Their knowledge will never be obsoleted by any changes to the rules. Yeah. And the player can always return to older strategies or experiment with them more, and those strategies will always work just as well as they used to, unlike if they had been forced to drop a strategy because it no longer worked because of... So now, I think what I would say for this is, like, when you're designing your different skill levels, make sure this is not the case. Like, make sure to minimize this as much as possible. Because I think that this is maybe being a little bit overstated. I mean, take Oro as an example. I don't think super high level players in Oro had to play much differently from low level players, as an example. Granted, that was kind of like a score thing, but yeah, maybe that's a bad example. So cancel that. That's how it works in everything. When you go to a new difficulty mode, a strategy can become obsolete because yeah, Oro is actually, I guess Oro does probably well, sort of. It unlocks monsters slowly over time. That was kind of just a weird call on our part, adding the monsters. But I do think that, like, I hope you probably agree that, like, at least you're going to need like an onboarding process where you like slowly reveal the rules to people over time. I like the idea of like, so you're saying the same strategies that work for the low level enemies work the same way for high level ones? Yeah. In Oro? I think so. I mean, I'm like a middle level person. No onboarding. Read the manual. I like the idea. Well, and also with onboarding should be skippable. I mean, I mean, yeah, obviously if somebody reinstalling the game or starting a new account or whatever, like they shouldn't have to go through the onboarding process again. So, yeah. Potential disadvantages. Even if you grant that score systems have the advantages I described above, you might object on the grounds that score systems also have disadvantages. All right, here we go. And those outweigh the advantages. I don't think any are significant inherent advantages to score systems. There are any. There are significant problems with most existing score systems, of course. To demonstrate the point, I'll respond to a list of proposed criticisms of score systems by, dude, I need to get back on the score beat, I guess, because like people are still making score based systems, and like I wrote this in 2014, and I haven't really written much about score since back then. But match length scales, it's like it's hard for me to motivate myself because I just feel like, you know, I'm just arguing. I'm kind of like, I guess, part of it's like I'm arguing for status quo a little bit. And like, I'm not really very motivated to do that. Like because status quo is not high score. In fact, I don't think people are doing that much high score as much these days. Back in the roguelike days, when everyone was like, roguelikes, everybody was doing that. And then it felt more appropriate to be writing articles against like the traditional high score things. But now, like, it sort of feels like, culture wide and also in games and even in my world, neck of the game world, it feels like for strategy games, like, games have win and loss states for the most part. And so I feel like I don't feel very motivated to argue for that, I guess, because it sort of feels like that's just what people are going to do anyway. And so like, I also feel like it's like, if I were to write that article, it would just be for Hoeppner. It would just be like an article for one, basically. Or I guess a little bit the community too, but mostly just for Hop. Match scale length scales indefinitely. Games like other intemporal mediums such as film or music have an ideal length. These are the traditional problems. Yeah, we don't need to go over that. We know about that. I agree that definitely, yep, that's a problem. Keith mentioned secondary problem. Yeah, see, so like these are problems with, of course, these are terrible. But we don't need to go through these. We all know about these. We all agree these are bad. Yeah, these are not even criticisms of your thing, Hop. These are just criticisms of the old pinball high score. Players end up having to choose their own goal. Ultimately, because of all this bizarre noise, players end up having to choose. Yeah. I agree that it's bad for players to have to choose their own goal, but they should be able to focus solely on trying to make good strategic decisions. There are no good criticisms of my system. Well, that's very tempting for me to write down the numerous criticisms that I have for them, but maybe I'll do that at some point. Maybe I'll make it like a forum post or something. I don't want to like commit to like an article necessarily, but I do need to write it. I'll have it written down somewhere just so that like, even if you think all my criticisms are bad, you'll have like an updated list that's more updated than 2014. I disagree that it's impossible to determine whether skills are increased or not. Conclusions. Given the advantages of score systems I've outlined and the fact that there are no significant disadvantages to score systems, I think the thing is like, this no significant disadvantages thing, like everything has significant disadvantages. Like if you think that something has no significant disadvantages, like you're just not looking at hard enough. And that goes for, binary as well. While it may be necessary to use win-loss systems in multiplayer games to avoid alienating players, there's already plenty of precedent for score systems in single-player games. The opportunity to use score systems is one of the great advantages that single-player games offer. Existing single-player win-loss games shouldn't necessarily be changed to use score systems because it may be difficult to make that change without breaking other parts of the game. The decision to use a score system is something that should be made early in the process of designing a game. And that's my other critique, is that if you do this, if you start off by thinking, okay, I'm making a game that has like a score and an average, I think that's going to push you towards making more tactical games. So existing win-loss games should probably be left as win-loss games. However, when designing new rule sets for new games, We have free reign to make whatever design decisions we make will be best, and we should take that opportunity to adopt score systems. So yeah, there's an article from Ella Hoeppner, aka Hop, um, one of our valued community members. I think it's a well written article. I think I like how it lays stuff out, and it's a shame actually. Here's another the shame sort of too is that like the fact that we have to refer to something I wrote in 2014 about this like just shows how like bereft of game design community the world is. Like there's no one talking about this. Like it's like literally me and Hop talk about this and fight about this, and like no one else is even like people make games and they try things and stuff. Um, well, I know, in Brick Road, like there's like 5 other people like in the planet that actually like care about this as an issue. Um, like and it's just I just making a side note. This is nobody's fault, but like it just kind of shows like how where we are in the process of like being game design people. I don't fight because I know which is correct. I mean, I sort of like I feel that way about this issue, the crash mode, and I feel bad, but I'm not terribly interested in fighting about this because like to me it feels like going back to a score mode of some kind or a score kind of thing. Just feels like I said, like aesthetically, I have some issues with it and stuff. And it would be hard for me to be motivated to play a game that was like that. Cause I just feel like I'd just be getting a bunch of draws as one thing. And, yeah, it's something about it's very demotivating. Let's see what else is going on. 2020 year of design. Yeah, I mean, we're getting a lot of game design stuff. I remember 2017. Does anyone remember that? In 2017, we got like all this game design stuff all of a sudden, and then it kind of dried up. But 2020 is looking pretty good so far. Maybe it would be, let's see. I don't think it would push you to make more tactical games. Maybe it would be like, maybe it would for like a designer who didn't understand the distinction between tactics and strategy and why not being tactical is important. But that's a problem with that designer, not with score systems. And yeah, that's the other thing too, is that like that whole way of thinking about strategy games is like, homework for KB, right? Anti-actor removal, anti-remove from system VP article. Oh, you want those together? I feel like they're 2 different things. Write article about strategy games shouldn't reward tactics. Okay, I'm going to make some sticky notes here real quick for my homework. I don't know if I'll do article about, maybe I will. Actor removal article. I've had a draft actually, I think, for years. Actor removal. And what was the other one? Strategy games shouldn't reward tactics. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, don't reward tactics is like, that's a really big point, actually, I think, because that implicates so much. Like so many of the critiques we've had about like, real-time strategy